These are the best metal albums of October 2024. It was a pretty big month for metal. I have 14 albums to talk about. I'm going to rank them from number 14 to my number 1 album of the month. I got a wide variety of genres. I got death metal, power metal, thrash, black metal. I got a little of everything. I'll go through these fairly quickly. I reviewed all these on my channel in some capacity, so let me get into it. Number 14, Frozen Crown with Warhearts. This is an Italian power metal band, just barely making the list. At first, I wasn't really impressed. I thought that their previous album was better, and I still kind of feel that way, but the album has grown on me a little. It's mostly a power metal album. There are elements of symphonic metal and traditional heavy metal. I like a lot of the songs, but they do have this similar style and pacing. Most of the songs are very fast-paced with big epic vocals. I think the best song on the album was the last song called Ice Dragon. It was a 7-minute plus epic. This one has lots of changes, lots of different melodies. As for the rest of the album, it's straightforward. If you like this type of music, I recommend you check it out. And number 13 is Ensiferum with Winter Storm. This is one of those bands, they mix up a lot of different genres, but at the surface, they're a power metal band. But they also have elements of melodic folk metal, some melodic death metal. This band has been around since the 90s. They play a lot of big epic songs that are fantasy-oriented. They sound like they're singing and getting ready to go into battle, but there are times when they sound like a typical power metal band, and other times they might sound more like a melodic death metal band, something along the lines of Amon Amarth. There are a few softer songs, such as the track Scars in My Heart. This has a female singer named Madeleine Legestam from the symphonic metal band Elaine. Otherwise, the rest of the album is pretty heavy. There are a lot of fast-paced songs with clean and harsh vocals. Another one that's growing on me. My original score was 7.5 out of 10. This one went up a little bit, and it made the end of the month list. And number 12 is Maul with In the Jaws of Bereavement. This is going to be one of the first of the few death metal bands that I'm going to talk about. This was a divisive album. I heard a few channels say they didn't like the album. I heard others say I liked it. Now, I've never listened to them before. I think they had one album before this. But in my opinion, I think they kind of slowed it down. I feel this is death metal, but a little slower. Not necessarily death doom, but the kind of death metal where they don't really go full speed at all times. That's not to say there aren't moments where they have blast beats and they speed it up. It's just the type of death metal that has a little bit more texture, and I thought it was a pretty decent album, so for that reason I have it on this list. And number 11 is Undeath with More Insane. This is another death metal band. It's one of those bands that you can call the new wave of old school death metal, if that's even a thing. This album was not too bad. It's pretty straightforward old school death metal. It sounds like those old bands from the Florida scene in the late 80s, early 90s, pretty much giving you straightforward death metal. They're not really thinking outside of the box in this album. It's a short album. There are 10 songs. It's 33 minutes long, basically filled with old school death metal style guitar riffs. So definitely worth a mention. My favorite song on the album was Bounty Hunter. I like the lyrics. It told the story of a bounty hunter who looks for people. Overall, worth checking out. And number 10 is Ashen with Ecstatic Death Rain. This is another death metal band from Helsinki, Finland. It's another death metal band, but I guess they have more of a European sound as opposed to the two previous bands I spoke of. It's another solid album. I think the difference was there was a little bit more speed and aggression. The vocals had more of that guttural sound, and they used a very distinctive guitar tone. And the songs had more of that chunky guitar tone. It almost sounds like thrash metal. It seems like they like to change tempos often. Like some songs, they like switch it up every few seconds. So overall, another really good death metal band for the month of October. And number 9 is Rise of Kronos with Imperium. This is a German death metal and thrash metal band. They kind of walked the line between the two genres. I thought it was a solid album. Probably a little easier to listen to than the aforementioned death metal bands. I think this might be a good recommendation for somebody who's more of a casual metal fan. If you want to introduce them to some heavier stuff, I think this is a good album to check out. It's like some of the more extreme thrash bands like Creator, but with some of those tremolo-picked death metal riffs and some of those like deathcore style harmonics. The vocals are also in a death metal style. It's a good album to check out. I recommend it if you've never heard of them before. Number 8 is Deserts of Mars with Dead Planet Exodus. This is a stoner rock and metal band from Austin, Texas. It's their second full-length album. It comes 13 years after the first one. It's a concept album about the planet Mars, a type of music that's a mix of those desert rock bands such as Caius or Fu Manchu, and some heavier stuff like Black Sabbath. It's definitely an interesting album. It's a concept album. It tells a story. The story is easy to understand if you read the lyrics, you listen along. Has a really good production value. You hear the guitars very well. You hear the bass very well. You hear elements of progressive rock and psychedelic rock. Some stuff sounds like proto-metal. Other stuff sounds like Pink Floyd. They even sound like some of the more like modern metal bands like Mastodon. So something that's really cool, and I recommend you check it out. And number 7 is Devin Townsend with PowerNerd. I did a full review of this album, and you all know who Devin Townsend is. He's released so many different albums over different names, and this is his 31st album, I think. It's hard to put him into a specific genre. I'm going to call it progressive metal. He has a very unique style. He uses lots of layers of sound. So the end product is this very big wall of sound where he mixes lots of ideas into one song. This is a lighter album than many of his other ones. It has a very humorous tone, not meant to be taken seriously. Kind of like this campy B-movie, horror movie. He plays homage to a lot of those metal bands from the 80s like Def Leppard and many others. It's a fun album, has catchy songs. Songs are memorable. More of an easier listening album compared to some of his other stuff is like really extreme, such as the old like Strapping Young Lad albums. Those were really heavy, but this was lighter. It's more fun. So overall, not too bad. At number 6 is Gaerea with Coma, a black metal band from Portugal, and in my opinion, the kind of black metal that's easier to listen to than many of the other black metal bands out there. It has that cleaner production. There's more softer sections throughout the album. There's atmospheric parts. There's clean singing. But there's still this black metal component to the sound where they just go full force with the black blast beats and the tremolo pick guitar riffs. But then there are other parts that sound like ambient music. So there's a lot going on with the album. They play some guitar riffs that sound like modern metal, but with a black metal sound. The vocals are easier to listen to. You can understand the lyrics if you listen closely, but they're still very harsh, aggressive black metal style vocals. And there's lots of melody in the lead guitar playing. So I recommend this for a newcomer. If you're not really into black metal, if you're like into all that like old school, like raw black metal, you might not like it. But if you like kind of like the more melodic stuff, I think it's a good album to check out. And number 5 is Iotunn with Kinship. This is a band from Denmark. Hard to describe. They're listed as progressive melodic death metal. Their sound mixes a lot of genres. Something along the lines of the band Insomnium and maybe even Enslaved. I wasn't blown away with this at first, but I had a lot of people tell me it's the album of the month or album of the year. So I gave it another chance. I spent some more time with it, and it's growing on me. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of soft and heavy parts. There's clean and harsh vocals. Lots of melodic guitar playing. There are times when the songs sound like melodic death metal. Other times they sound like black metal. There are a few songs that remind me of like the progressive metal band like Evergrey. For example, the song I Feel the Night. Then there were songs like The Coming End. It has like a lot of technical musicianship. There was a song called Iridescent Way, which is just like an all acoustic folk song. So there's a lot of variety on this album. A lot of different stuff here, and it's pretty good, worth a listen. And number 4 is Escuela Grind with Dreams on Algorithms. So this is one of those albums I liked right from the beginning. They are a New England-based band combining hardcore, grindcore, and metal. The album is just 10 songs. The entire album is 30 minutes long. One of those albums you put on, it's completely brutal music from start to finish. It's filled with guitar riffs. There are lots of tempo changes, lots of fast and frenetic drumming. They play with the tempos. They play lots of stop-start guitar riffs. And the last track, they have female singers. Actually, I think there are 2 females in the band, if I'm not mistaken. But it's lots of heavy music, big riffs, extreme metal, big breakdowns, all that good stuff. My original score was a 9 out of 10, and it holds up. I don't really have much more to say about it, but definitely check it out. And number 3 is Jerry Cantrell with I Want Blood. So this is somebody who doesn't need any introduction. We know who he is. I'm including this on the best metal albums list because I feel this was much heavier than his previous album from 2 years ago called Brighton. I think he's going for more of a darker tone, more of a somber tone. He's playing heavier riffs. A lot of it sounds like classic Alice in Chains, so definitely worth a mention. There are lots of great melodies, lots of great guitar riffs, and anything Jerry Cantrell does is really good. The singles were good, but my favorite song was towards the end. It's called Let It Lie. This one had those like sludgy guitar riffs and a very dark sound. So I recommend this album. Number 2 is Nasty Savage with Jeopardy Room. This was a surprise because I didn't think this was going to be an album that stands out. I was expecting like another generic thrash metal album that I would have forgotten of. But this one had great songs. If you didn't know, they were a thrash band in the early 80s. They were a big influence on the Florida death metal scene. So I thought this was some clean thrash metal. The vocals are easy to understand. I thought they had a crossover sound. But then there are times they go into death metal. So there's one song where they have two members from the band Obituary. That's probably, I think it's called Witch of Sabbath. That's like one of the best songs. But all the songs are very memorable. You sing along to them, and it sounds like it was released in the late 80s. It's one of my favorite thrash metal albums of the year. I think this is my dark horse. This is my surprise album. That's why I have it at number 2. But it's not number 1. My number 1 is Blood Incantation with Absolute Elsewhere. So it shouldn't come to any surprise. It's number 1. Probably the most unique album I've heard in a long time. They mix death metal with progressive rock and psychedelic rock. It's structured in a way there are 2 songs. Each song is 3 parts. They call it Tablet 1, Tablet 2, Tablet 3. And it's structured like those big progressive rock songs from bands like either Yes or Rush or Emerson, Lake and Palmer or any other progressive rock band from the 70s. They sound like death metal at times. Other times they sound like Pink Floyd. Other times they sound like King Crimson. And they do it well, and the albums are cohesive. Like they were able to pull this off. So for that reason, it's number 1. So that's all. Check out last week's episode, new metal releases of October 25th. Thanks for watching. Please give this video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe. If you have not already, I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. I have merch. I have memberships. You can find all that good stuff in the video description or in my bio. I will see you in the next one.